Welcome to Brewsers, a podcast about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. I am your host, Rody John, and today we speak to Mike Ryan with Big Stick Bourbon. We talk all about Big Stick Bourbon's origins, the way they give back to the veterans with every purchase, and so much more. This was such a fun conversation with Mike, and he definitely nerds out on a lot of things, and we definitely get into it. But Big Stick Bourbon and what they're doing with their bourbon is absolutely fantastic stuff, and I can't wait for y'all to try it. Now, while you're doing that, make sure to sign up for our newsletter. It comes out twice a week. You get even more information about our guests, you get fun facts, and you get to find out what's happening with your favorite podcast, all about beer, coffee, booze, and bruisers. So without further ado, here is Mike Ryan with Big Stick Bourbon. I would like to welcome to the show Mike Ryan with Big Stick Bourbon. How are you doing today, sir?
Good, John. Nice to talk with you today.
Nice having you on. Now, for everybody listening, kind of paint us a word picture. Where are you at? What's going on around you right now?
So we started in Katy, Texas. My family served in all the different branches of the military for services, and I wanted to do something special to honor our military, so we came up with the idea of Big Stick Bourbon.
That's awesome. Yeah, I saw that you give 5% of all of your proceeds to the military charities and veterans. Tell us more about that before we get more into the bourbon.
Sure. My family served in literally Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Navy SEALs, and even the Space Force now.
Wow.
So I got everybody except the Coast Guard. So maybe we'll get one of them one of these days. But yeah, having lived with this, since I was a little kid, before I was born, my father was in the Army, and so I've lived with it literally, this, if you want to call it this attitude or this culture, since I was born, and it's just always been a part of me. Who's going where? Who's doing what? Who's being deployed here? Who's coming back on leave? Kind of a thing. And to me, it was just a natural. And as time got older. And I was traveling in the country, on 9/11. And as you know, that affected everybody, lost a lot of people. And as I got older, I was an engineer, I'm an inventor. And I said, I want to do something special. So one of my ideas was I came up with putting a charred oak stick in a bourbon bottle and trying to, legally it's not the right term, to age it in the bottle. We can say finishes in the bottle is the legal term. But it turns out that's actually better than just trying to age it in a barrel. So I'll explain all the science in a bit. But I want to do something to honor our military. So I called up a buddy of mine who is also Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Marine Corps. And I said, I got this idea. And he said, yeah, let's do it. So I've got other patents to my name. And I called my patent attorney and filed a patent. And lo and behold, we got a patent on the idea as well. So it turns out it's pretty special and it works like a charm.
I read that you were an inventor, and I heard in other interviews that you do have different patents, which, let's go into that real fast. What other patents do you own? Like, how many do you own first off, and then which ones are they?
It's, I think it's about 8, and I've got 2 or 3 in the works at any given time. It's on for those of you who are lumberjacks like me, good old fashioned, like to play with your chainsaw. I designed a new kind of a chainsaw chain. It's a double-edged chainsaw. And I got a patent on that in several European countries and in Canada. And hopefully I'm on the last round of patent examiner issues with the United States. And then I've got 1 patent on the bourbon. I've got 2 or 3 in provisional status. And then I've also started an energy company, and I'm filing a provisional patent on a form of a nuclear reactor, of all things.
Really?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess you want to be an inventor, you just don't sleep at night. I don't know. It's just one of them things. Yeah.
I don't want to get too much into the weeds about the way that we are reliant so much on gas and the fact that nuclear really is the only way and for the future to continue the way we are. But people are still obviously worried about it, with Chernobyl and everything that happened as well. So obviously people are very skeptical, but that was also many, many decades ago, and we technology-wise have gone light years in the future. So I feel like, obviously as you have a patent, you are
also probably on the bandwagon that nuclear power probably is what our future needs to be.
Well, it's like everything else, and in the military, right? Everybody's issued a rifle, and you know how to use it, and you're trained, and you don't point the sharp end at people you don't want to hurt, right? I mean, that's kind of how it goes. If you know what you're doing, it's just like driving a car, in our business. Don't drive when you're drinking, it's not a wise thing to do. Everything is just a tool. I'm an engineer, and my whole thing about my life and adding purpose to my life is trying to build something to make this place a better world. And I started out in advanced engineering at General Motors. I designed analog brake systems. Obviously, that's a pretty cool invention, saves a lot of lives, right? Analog brakes are pretty darn important for a lot of people. Even in the South, when it rains and it pours, the roads get slippery. So, that's kind of cool. Then I left, went to work for an aerospace engineering firm where we design missiles, right? And when you fire off missiles, you're doing it for very strategic purposes. You want to, really strike a target and only that target, so everything's got to work just right at the right time so you accomplish your mission. So, in my life, everything's been about making stuff that works right the first time and, does something to help people out. So, that's
awesome.
really why I keep doing what I do. And, in terms of nuclear, without, like I said, without getting into the weeds, because it gets very much into the weeds very fast, and aside from the politics, but it's just like everything else. If you know what you're doing and you have the right safeguards, and truthfully, if you have the right designs, a lot of these Chernobyls and 3 Mile Islands, they were human errors. And they occurred right when they started the design. I mean, Fukushima, a nuclear plant. Why would you put a nuclear plant, 50 yards from the ocean in a tsunami and an earthquake zone? Why didn't you put it, another 500 yards up the mountain? I don't know. That was human error right from the blueprint. So,
No, you're 100% right. I knew there was one in Japan. The name escaped me, so I'm glad you had brought that up as well. But yeah, I mean, again, it's all political things, and we can get in the weeds about it. But hopefully, in the future, we could see the error of our ways and revisit the whole conversation about nuclear power.
So if you got any listeners that happen to be venture capital investors, they want to invest in somebody who owns a bourbon company and a nuclear plant, that would be pretty cool.
I mean, they could also use your double-sided chain as well to clear out some of these trees that are in the way.
To clear out some of those trees. That's correct.
Yeah.
You betcha.
See?
Believe me, I've cut down enough trees in my yard. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Well, I imagine also there's plenty of lumberjacks that love bourbon as well. So I think this could speak to them as well. Yeah.
Maybe it's a cultural thing, yeah.
I think it's also a keeping them warm type of thing as well.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, let's go all the way back in time. I know, obviously, you grew up in a military household, but what is your earliest memory of alcohol?
Oh, I was a little kid, so I'm half Irish and half Italian. So
okay.
we've always used it as social. The Irish, with the whiskey, and I used to sit on my grandfather's lap in the holidays and used to give me a little sip of red wine over the holidays. So, we've always used it for family and get-togethers and celebrating holidays and being together. So that's really, where it came from. So to me, it's all about, celebrations with family. It's kind of how it, came about.
Love that. So let's go forward in time now. How did Big Stick Bourbon begin?
Great. Well, the truth, my hand on the Bible, is, I joke about people. I say I had this brilliant idea. Well, I couldn't have done it without my wife nagging me. So that's the truth. Because I used to travel all over the world, and I've got quite a collection. And years ago, we moved into this new home, which had a really nice bar set up. And the elderly lady that was leaving, she was downsizing, she called my wife and said, would your husband mind if I left behind about 50 or 100 bottles of liquor? Because I can't take them with me in the new place. It's much smaller. So she said, oh, I think you'll be okay with that. We don't have to twist his arm. So I had quite a collection. And I had no place to put it. I mean, the bar was full, and my wife said, you've got to get rid of all this stuff. And I said, okay, but I'm frugal. I'm not throwing it down the drain.
Okay.
So I started tasting different ones to see which ones I liked. And then the engineer in me kicked in and said, wait a minute. they all taste good, not to disparage anybody. They all taste good, but they're all variations on a theme. There's only so much you can do. And I went on the internet like a good inventor and I started researching this stuff. And you realize that 90% of them come from like the top 3 distilleries in America, right? They're all billion-dollar businesses. They use the same juice and they slap a different label on it, or a different proof, or this one's aged in the top rack, this one's aged in the bottom rack. So yeah, it tastes a bit different. Okay. All well and good. And then I said, well, geez, I knew a lot about wine too. And I said, why doesn't bourbon age like wine? And the answer is because it's alcohol. When you put alcohol in a glass bottle, it stays that way forever. When you put wine in a glass bottle, it's organic. It still has organic compounds in it, so it continues to age, if you will, even though it's wine. So I said, well, how do you do that with bourbon? How could you make it really different? And there are people trying to do artificial aging by forcing pressure and temperature on bourbon through wood chips and all kinds of stuff like that. And I said, well, I've tasted some of those. Personally, for me, they taste artificial, And when you research why, it's because when you force feed alcohol through wood chips, you get all of the chemicals transferred to the alcohol and the liquid, if you will. Well, some chemicals are very good and very tasty. Some others are not. Some of them taste too much like charcoal, and they're harsh. So if you research the chemistry behind American white oak, which is really the whole, basis for everything, all natural American white oak has about 140 chemicals in it. 3 or 4 of those are wood sugars, fructoses. Well, the fructose is a much more complex sugar molecule than sucrose or glucose, right? It's what's found in strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, etc. Well, as you know from cooking, any cooking lesson will tell you, when you char sugar, you get caramel. So by taking a brand new piece of wood, not a used barrel stave, but a brand new piece of wood fresh from the mill, which is what we do, we cut it down to size, and you char it, you char the wood sugars that are in that piece of oak. So that's where you get all the caramel flavors in bourbon. Well, likewise, there's other chemicals in the resins, and maybe this is deep in the weeds, but for chemistry lessons out there, the geeks, bourbon geeks out there, they're called phenolic acids. A phenolic acid is a weak acid. You may know it as an ester or an aromatic or a flavonoid. Well, it's a precursor chemical to making vanilla extract in the grocery stores. So that's where that comes from. So the same chemicals are in vanilla beans. And the way you make vanilla extract at any grocery stores, you squeeze the heck out of a vanilla bean and you literally throw that into an alcohol base. Well, the way you make artificial vanilla extract, same exact process, except you squeeze the heck out of American white oak. Turns out oak's a lot cheaper than vanilla beans. That's why artificial vanilla extract is cheaper than the real stuff.
Right.
So by doing all that, that's where you get those multiple notes. And then, for what we do, I tell everybody it's not just a gimmick. We don't just throw a stick in the bottle. If you take a look at our bottle, you can go to bigstickspirits.com and look at the bottle's tall and square, and so is the stick inside of it. And even though we joke, we say the size of the stick matters. It really does. It's true science and engineering. The surface area ratio of the stick relative to the liquid in the bottle is the same number, or close to the same number, as if the bourbon was in the 53-gallon barrel. So we inverted the ratio. Instead of putting the bourbon in the barrel, we literally put the barrel inside the bourbon. We designed it so the stick comes first, the bourbon surrounds it as the liquid, and then we figured out what kind of bottle would fit that profile to achieve this goal. And that's where we came up with this synergy of design for the tall, square bottle.
Yeah, I was curious about how you guys landed on that bottle as well, because obviously when you're building a brand and you're building a spirit brand the way you are, obviously the bottle matters as well, but also, like you're saying, there's science behind y'all's choice of that bottle.
Absolutely. Everything was scientific. The bottle